Right. It's just setting up the live stream now, so I should be back on in a minute. If anyone can put something in the here we go. Right, we're back on. It's just setting up the live stream now, so I should be back on. Fantastic. Apologies for all the technical issues, everybody. As always, technology can be our greatest friend, but also our greatest foe. So after a little bit of rejigging, we're back. Everything should be running as usual now. So what I'd like to do is go back and try again and share the wonderful video from our event partner, Living Beyond Surviving, with Justina Duncan.
I've been receiving quite a few messages asking for support and advice on how to help those who are experiencing domestic abuse. So if you have a friend, a family member, a neighbour, or anybody that you know who is experiencing abuse, I'm going to give you a few pointers today on how to help that person. But please note that there is different levels of abuse. You have your low level, your medium level, and your high level of abuse. Some of the pointers that I'm going to give you today may not work if that person is going through high level of abuse. The reason why I say this is because high level abusers will monitor the victim. So they will monitor their phones, monitor their text messages, monitor who they're allowed to see, who they can't see. They go through extreme high level of abuse and monitoring and isolation. I will do a separate video on this. But for those who are experiencing low to medium level of abuse, one of the first things that you can do is keep in contact with them. Make sure that you're in regular contact with them, whether that be by phone, text messages. Let them know that you're there. Be that listening ear for them. They may want to talk, they may need to vent, they may need to, talk about their experience and what they're going through. So keep in touch, arrange to have, evenings out, days out, get them out the house. So this will help those who are feeling isolated or are being isolated by their abuser. If the person that you know is going through gaslighting, any form of emotional abuse, listen to them, listen to what they have to say, do not judge them, be that listening ear, affirm their feelings, affirm their thoughts. Women that are going through gaslighting are often made to feel by their abuser that they're crazy, or they're going crazy, or they're imagining things, until that person doesn't even trust their own thoughts. So you be that person to affirm their thoughts, affirm their feelings, and this will help them to be able to trust their feelings, to trust their own thoughts, to feel that they're not crazy or they're not going crazy. If you've had your own experiences, sorry, of being gaslighted, share that with them. So this will also help them to understand that they're not alone. There's others that are going through this, there's others that's experienced this. When you're sharing your concerns of your friend or your family member's abusive relationship, share that gently. Don't go calling them stupid. How can you be with that person? I would never let anybody abuse me. That is a no, no, no. Please love them, support them without judgment. Okay? That is one of the worst things that anybody can do, is to judge or tear down somebody who's already vulnerable. Okay, so offer that support and advice gently. Gently give them that support of where they can go. So there's loads of support services out there my services. We offer emotional support by doing support programs. You've got refuges out there. You've got the 24-hour domestic violence line. So get a list of support services that can help them, provide them with that support service, be that listening ear. Go through safety planning. I have a detailed safety plan on my website. I will put my website at the bottom of this video. Go through safety planning with them, encourage them to go to the police to report incidents that is happening. So it's about being, you know, that supportive person, that non-judgmental friend or family member, gently offering that love and support to that person, being in contact, being that listening ear, trying to get them out the house, having days out, you know, be that support. Okay. And if you do need any more support and advice on this, I will leave my contact details at the bottom of the video. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So that was Justina Duncan, and she is the founder of Living Beyond Surviving. There's a lot of useful information there. Some of it you may have known already, and some perhaps, you know, might have been new. But this is a forum for us to have these conversations. And please, all the information that is required will be available at the end of this session, but I want to jump straight into our panel discussion now. Remember that you can make comments, you can ask questions. If you're watching through YouTube, the comment section is open. If you would prefer to send us an email, the email to use is author@dionsimpson.co.uk. So that's author@Dion Simpson, Dion has two N's, by the way, .co.uk. And somebody will be monitoring the comments for us. So you heard at the beginning of the video, the introduction of the people who are on the panel. We have some phenomenal women, and I'm not being cliche about it. We genuinely on this call have women who, in spite of the stuff that they've been through, they are giving back. And I think it's always quite useful for us to hear from people who have lived experience, because, you know, we can see the data, we can see the graphs, we know all the jargon, all the buzzwords, but actually hearing people's personal experiences has impact. It makes it more relatable and more human. So you're going to be hearing from the wonderful women that we have on our panel. I'm going to jump straight in with my first question. Based on your experiences and also in general, Maz, I'm going to come to you first. What would you say the impact of domestic abuse is on victims? In the beginning of the call, you talked about narcissistic abuse. I think at this stage it's important that we sort of remember that violence, abuse, we're not only talking about when somebody slaps you in the face, because we know it goes a lot further than that. But Maz, I'm going to give you space now to just, what do you think the impacts are or could be?
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that, EJ, because domestic violence, we tend to think of it in terms of intimate partner abuse between a man and a woman. We know it happens to men, but women tend to be more at risk. So using the Home Office definition of what that is in terms of domestic violence, it happens to people over the age of 16. So it might be coercion. I know for me, it was definitely psychological. And at the hands of caregivers, various caregivers in this country, abroad, and it's quite insidious. So I want to also just clarify that people use the term narcissist quite a lot to describe anyone who they don't like. So me working in the mental health field, I am referring to specifically narcissistic personality disorder. But, you know, people have traits and what have you, and it can be quite soul destroying because that's the impact on me. And I guess you're asking about the impact primarily on my spiritual, on my mental health. I wasn't able to, the first thing that happened was a loss of identity. Didn't know who I was because I was so enmeshed with those other people, much of whom were family members. I wasn't allowed to question, have my own identity. I certainly there was some financial exploitation in that as well, but mainly I would say psychological. And it had me, you know, because as you mentioned earlier, it's about the gaslighting, and sometimes you know things intellectually, but then you start to doubt and you think, oh, well, you know, because the person is so skilled in those techniques of manipulation, you begin to think, is that, you know, is that who I am? So
Yes.
for me, ultimately, it resulted in having to have years of therapy. Just to to level, and it's ongoing, because actually you never quite get to the point where you arrive. You learn techniques and strategies. I work in the mental health field and can identify it, but because that type of abuse is so insidious, because people say things like, "Oh, that's your pastor, that's your father." These titles, who knew that these titles could give people a license for abuse? So it's almost when they say that, or that's your elder, you must bow down and tolerate whatever they give you because they've got those titles, which of course is
Yeah.
nonsense. So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because I wanted to sort of bring it very, very close to home here, because you mentioned, because like you say, we always assume it's an intimate partner, but you mentioned family members, you've mentioned pastor, you've mentioned other people who are influential and maybe perhaps in a place of authority, and the people that we would easily trust.
Yeah.
You also talked about their therapy. Now, that's a nice segue into my next question, because you're the perfect person to start with this. And then I'm going to bring Cornita in a minute as well. But therapy and Black people. So I'm a Nigerian and I wasn't born in the UK. I came to this country as an adult.
Right.
And when you say therapy, even till today, I'm still like, oh, come on, what's that going to do? What's talking about it going to do? So I suppose my next question is, and Cornita, feel free to unmute yourself as well. But my next question really is, what kind of support, because we will go deeper into our stories as this goes on, but just as an off chance, while everybody's here, what kind of support is available? And why don't we as Black people engage with, well, what is therapy? And why isn't it part of our culture?
I'll come in because I know Cornita's got her own organization that addresses those. But I work in the mental health field, and part of my job when I'm in my social work role is to discharge people with acute mental illness. And I always ask them, how did you get here? Often I'm met with, I don't know, but Black people don't have therapy. That's the common thing. So just like you from the D, I'm like, really, who told you that? These are harmful legacies that we've been left with, because along the line, and I was told the same thing in my family, do not trust the authorities. You do not go to them and air your dirty laundry. And I, for one, have always been a bit of a black sheep, so I renounced what my tradition, what the family said, because I'm going to get my healing. If you don't want it, that's fine, but I'm going to get mine. So I'm not staying stuck. But I think it's a cultural conditioning. I think there's all kinds of things, and I won't go on about being in a patriarchal society, but we this notion as well, EJ, of being strong Black women, and we are, but being strong also means asking for help, giving yourself permission for help. And I think until in 2024, we're still struggling. Like you said, it's cultural, isn't it? It's and we're going to talk about spiritual things a bit more, and religion and the impact that plays on us, because for some of us, we were taught to pray things away, just pray it away. You're not strong enough. Why are you being weak? We don't have traumas, and all the lies, by the way, because they are lies, because we are overrepresented. I don't know if people know that. Black people in particular are overrepresented in the mental health services and the criminal justice system. So we need to stop that nonsense about not needing help and we don't need therapy, because actually I think everybody does. We all have traumas, whether we're conscious of them or not, and they need to be addressed, because the thing about traumas are they creep up on you and at the most inconvenient time. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Konita, I'm going to bring you in now, but I want to just really, just as we're talking, I'm going to be bringing out some keywords that the ladies are saying, and you just mentioned healing. And I think that's a good way to frame it, because if we see mental health services or therapy or whatever is available for us out there as I'm going to get my healing, then that rephrases it. It's very different from don't trust the authorities, don't go tell those people your business, we're not airing. It's my healing. I'm going to get my healing, and it's my responsibility to pursue that. So Konita, what are your thoughts in terms of and why are we reluctant?
As Maz says, a lot of our, I'll say elders, grandparents will say, anything that's going on in the household or in our relationship, put it underneath the carpet. Don't say nothing, keep quiet. And that's been from back home. My background is Jamaican. So back home in Jamaica, that's what's been said. We're not allowed to talk about our problems. So regarding when you're saying about mental health, it is crucial. We do need the mental health sectors to come in, but we as a culture, we need to be more open. I personally didn't go for counselling when I first went through my trauma, because I had a lot of ears in my, don't go and speak to anyone. But I know that being a massage therapist, a lot of people come to me and they talk. And literally, maybe because they're half naked on the bed, I don't know what it is, but they literally let everything out. And sometimes it's things that can trigger me, I'll be honest. But when I'm listening and I realize that that person needs an outlet, and if it means massage, I say that I'm an agony aunt. I'm a massage therapist. I'm an agony aunt. I will listen. I will maybe give advice, but I'll also let them know that I'm not trained in anything. Like I'm not a mental health nurse or anything like that. So don't take what I say gospelly, but that's just my opinion. But yeah, I think that in our culture, we do need to be more open and really look for other avenues to help to healing our traumas. We have self-esteem, low self-esteem, no confidence, self-worth, and we need to build that back up, and we need to be more open in our community.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. See, I'm coming from my Nigerian stroke British background. You're Caribbean. Maz, coming from her background, which is British as well. I'm thinking Caribbean as well. There's somebody on the YouTube comment who says it's the same in the South Asian culture. And so this is a thing, this is a thing. It seems like our communities, there is a lack of trust in there. But talking from my personal experience, I come from a very religious background, and I'm from a generation where if your husband beats you, your parents or your elders will take house because you're married. And God does not like divorce and all this. And if you're a woman, what did you say? Oh, your mouth, you must have said something to cause him to hurt you or to cause them to hurt you. What did you do? What did you wear? Where did you go? And there is an element of victim blaming that perhaps has made us reluctant to be as open as we should be when it comes to issues like this. So Chantal, I'm going to come to you now in terms of the victim blaming side of things. And Dion, I think you can contribute to this as well. So in our communities, I'm talking about Black and other ethnic minorities, because some of us are, closed in our communities, in our upbringing, that kind of stuff. How does victim blaming, how does it manifest itself within the Black community, particularly for women who are going through domestic abuse? And what can we do? What can we do? Because this is a generation, I'm looking at your faces, we're all very, very similar ages here, I think. Or otherwise, or maybe you guys just look so young, I don't know. But I think we are of a generation, we are of a generation who are now bringing up daughters, okay? And we know that perhaps our elders maybe didn't get it right all the time, which is why we're here. So we have a responsibility. But Chantal, first of all, can you just talk to us about victim blaming, how it manifests, and perhaps what we can do about it?
I think victim blaming narratives are quite interesting, especially for Black women, because I feel like, as previous speakers have said, the strong Black woman narrative is so strong in Western cultures. This idea, you know, we're almost like put up on this pedestal of being able to overcome intolerable amounts of pain. Like we see that in medical settings, this idea that we don't feel pain or we're really, really tough. And that's kind of a double-edged sword. So my background's in children's services, and you would see this kind of narrative of Black mothers as uncaring and almost unfeeling. And so if you are trying to report domestic abuse and the person looking at you thinks you are both uncaring and unfeeling, that idea of you as, you know, and I know we use the language of survivors, but I should have said my background is also policing and I'm a former police officer. The language within policing is literally victim perpetrator. So the police officer is always looking for a victim and always looking for a perpetrator. But there is an ideal victim. I have a criminological background too. And the ideal victim in Western societies is never a Black woman. The ideal victim is a petite, white, blonde woman who fits this very feminine, you know, aesthetic of traditional feminism. It's not a Black woman. So quite often when authorities are presented with a Black woman, there's this idea, well, you can't be a victim. And so that affects everything from their interactions verbally to the interventions and to the response that women get. And then I feel like the other side of that is that there's this internal expectation within the community to be at the front, to be bearing the brunt of like it's often abuse that cannot be tolerated. I'm not going to try and say intolerable because I seem to have the word from it. I'm like, why can't I say the word today? Intolerable, I got it back. But there's this idea again that the Black woman must just bear this brunt. And also there's this idea of victim blaming and again, I've got an activist background. So at the front of most activist campaigns and, you know, Black Lives Matter, anytime when there's an injustice against our men, women will come out and defend men. So there's almost this understanding that because the authorities are so against men, our men, especially Black men, there's a betrayal if a woman ever goes to the police about a Black man. And it's like, you know what these authorities do to our men. So therefore, how dare you, no matter what, how dare you go to the authorities about our men? And that creates this silence, you know, this idea that there's nowhere for Black women to go or present or say this is happening. And then just this expectation in communities of this silence because you cannot go to the police because it's almost regarded as a death sentence. And I feel like there's no space within that narrative for Black women to be vulnerable, for Black women to reach out for help, or for Black women to say this is happening. And before I became a police officer, as I say, my pathway was quite interesting because I grew up in care. And I was in an abusive relationship with someone who was clearly grooming me, but I thought he was just amazing. I was 16 and he was 24, to give you an idea of how clear that was. And when I realised how the relationship was going, it was a very controlling relationship. I cut the relationship off. At this point, this person started following me, stalking me, harassing me, phoning me, turning up at me work, you know, the usual stuff, turning up at me work, reaching out to my friends. One of the awful incidents was when he managed to get, because he was following me down the road in his car, just saying my name. And I was really embarrassed and I thought the easiest thing to make it stop is to just get in the car with him. At which point he went at about 70 miles an hour and said he was going to kill me. And I, at the light, because he did stop at the light, just jumped out the car and ran. And I didn't phone that in because I was like, the police aren't going to believe me. I had no trust in the police. But then he broke into, 2 years later after breaking up with him, he broke it. So he just continued to stalk me. He broke into my flat, cut my face out of pictures in my flat and wrote F you Chantel on the floor. And the police came and I said, this is my ex is stalking me, like this is him. And the police officer went, no, it just looks like a burglary. I was like, oh. I was like, and so the police officer just refused to even contemplate that there was any kind of abuse going. And I was like, why would a burglar cut my face out of pictures? This is ridiculous. And it wasn't until he actually assaulted a police officer that they took any action. But my complaint was just never actioned as anything because this police officer, who was a white man, just looked at me. And I was very, very young, you know, I was a teenager, and he just could not see a victim or any vulnerability. So as you know, when I was a police officer, I always had that at the forefront of my mind, how that trust is viewed because of how we're often treated. So yeah, I feel like it's really difficult for Black women because there's no space to be a victim, and we were sort of strong, and we, you know, there's no space for that victim narrative.
I think you've made such an important point about the different ways of the victim blaming, and how we are not allowed to be victims. We are, like you say, we don't fit that victim physique. We don't look like victims. We don't sound like victims. And how dare you have a voice? As the way it comes across. My experience when I was, and I'll come to you in a minute, Dion, but when I first moved to the country, because again, my background is as an immigrant. My perspective is that of an immigrant woman who's moved to the UK. And I've come from Africa, from a religious society where, of course, like you say, we don't, you know, you grin and bear it, you're a strong Black woman, so you just take it. And then one day, somebody I was in a relationship with, it had been so bad. But on this particular day, I thought, this is the day he's going to kill me. And he had his hand around my neck and struggling to breathe. And I think, I'm just going to go. I'm just going to let it happen. And then I thought, if I let that happen, he would have cheated my family out of, he would have cheated me out of life. So I somehow escaped, ran into the bathroom. And for the first time, I called the police. And they came. My accent is a lot different now. I was a very, very Nigerian sounding Nigerian woman, confused, vulnerable, scared. And the police officer, we lived in a flat. The man went upstairs to talk to him, and the woman stayed with me downstairs. And what she said to me is, why don't you just go back to your country? And I thought, sorry, like, the question just, I was so confused. Like, what do you mean? Is that going to make him not, like, what, is that going to make him stop hitting? Like, he's just tried to, I'm telling you what this, I'm still like short of words. Like, what do you mean, why don't I go back to my country? What a question to ask me right now. And since then, calling the police in that way stopped. So it means the abuse just continued, because then the trust was gone. Dion, can you come in about this victim blaming culture? And I'd like you to please, if you like, if you don't mind, can you come in with your experience first? Because I know, you know, we share similar backgrounds, although from different sides of the world.
Yeah.
But could you come in with your experience first?
I mean, first, I'd just like to say, if there was a crown for being the queen of victim blaming, the crown would belong to me. So victim blaming for me started really, really early. So I grew up in a very zealous Christian household, which was restrictive to the point of, you know, borderline cult, excluding all the rest of the world, no access to TV, no like music, all the books were vetted, we couldn't go out to play with friends, all our clothes were controlled, everything, absolutely everything controlled. Oh. So I thought, I have a cat. And I mean, I didn't know for the longest time. My birth father left when I was about 5. So he was a Jamaican, my mother's Jamaican, and she remarried a white guy from Leeds. That's not strange, but it was strange the fact that he was 10 years younger than her. So much, much younger, married a lady in her 30s with, you know, 2 children. Okay, you know, it does happen. He had been grooming my sister and I for many, many years. And then when the abuse got physical and sexual, and I eventually was brave enough to share that, the result was that my parents basically ganged up on their child. I got torn to shreds about how dare I, you know, I'm a home wrecker, I'm trying to wreck their marriage. They had, because we lived such restrictive lives, the only places that I ever went were home, school, church, that was it. And so they'd gone to church ahead of me and told everybody this lie about how bad I'd been, how wicked I was, how I'd lied to everybody. Our whole extended family were told the same thing. And, you know, it was horrific, you know. So my earliest memories are of being blamed for trying to ask for help for abuse from my own family, which of course, you know, not only have I carried that, but I've seen it perpetuated in so many different ways. So me and my daughter's a teenager now, and we were having a chuckle. So I'm not with her father. He's an addict. You know, he's been on and off the wagon for his whole life, and he's still convinced and actually tells people that he left our marriage because I was abusive. And and everybody's so quick to believe it. So, you know, we were both Christians, and the church we went to, the pastors so vehemently believed his version of she's abusive. So he did that thing where, you know, the joke about dad going to buy milk and not coming back. He went to work in the morning, kissed everybody, and we never saw him again.
Wow.
5 weeks later, and I'm like, so why have my pastors not been to see me or check up on me and my kids to see if we need anything? And I was getting these really weird messages from them. They're like, well, we think you've got some things you need to deal with. And I'm just like, what's happening now? They eventually said that, you know, my daughter's father had been telling them, and presumably everybody, that he'd run away because I was abusive. They'd got him holed up in a flat somewhere. Right? And now my question is, so he has, you know, apart from being an on and off addict, has got a criminal record as long as your arm. I don't have any criminal record. I've got no, you know, I do have a past with an addiction, but, you know, once I've recovered from that, I've not fallen off the wagon. I was like, why is it so easy to believe that I am the abuser and not the other way around?
Yeah.
I've seen that play out so many times. I've called, you know, Merseyside police, and despite the fact that I've called, they've spoken to my white middle class husband, didn't even speak to me. And of course, he spun them this yarn about this wild black girl who's on drugs and like is doing his best with her, blah, blah, blah. And I don't get the help that I need. And I've even seen that extended to medical settings. So in hospitals, the GPs, they sometimes go through the like depression questionnaire with you, like mental health questionnaire. Just for background, my one of my my very first husband, there's been a few. So he, you know, abused me and my whole family for 18 years, and it only stopped when he died. He's also the person who stole my eldest child, who we haven't seen for nearly 9 years. So when I tell you, you know, the effects of domestic abuse have been real and raw. So we're going through this questionnaire at the GP, a GP I don't normally see. And we've gone to the question, have you ever felt like, you know, harming yourself or anybody else? I jokingly say, well, apart from my ex-husband, no. Now, I'm sure most of us, you know, we laugh about these things and we know it's not a funny topic, but we understand that's, you know, a way of dealing with that sort of thing. And the doctor proceeds, so every day after that appointment, the doctor rang me 4 days in a row. It's Christmas now. So I'm avoiding the calls, and because I'm avoiding the calls, the doctor sent the police to my house on the basis that she was worried that I was a risk of being violent and harming somebody.
Oh,
no criminal record, no history of violence. Yeah, and I'm just like,
yeah.
You know,
let me come in there, Dion, because these are some upsetting, if I'm honest with you. These are some upsetting situations that you've been in, and upsetting situations that I suppose we're on this panel because we have been through upsetting situations. And I think we are not random. It is on purpose that this situation, that this event is taking place, because there is a specific problem as regards Black and ethnic minority women when it comes to domestic abuse. We are not making it up. These are situations that are happening to us today in our real lives. I mean, I'm looking at some of the YouTube comments, by the way. Keep bringing them on. We're reading them and we will be responding to them later on. But these are real issues. Before I go to the next question, what I would like to do is I would like to ask the panel, just so that the people who are listening to us can see the humanity behind all of this. I mean, we have, you know, a strong Black woman, we are. But just like Dion has given us some really like ridiculous stories, if I'm honest with you, you know, saying to the GP, oh gosh, I really wanted to kill my ex-husband. And then getting the police called on her for that. It sounds ridiculous, but it is happening. So I want the panel, if you don't, and I am going to stop you, by the way, 1 minute each. Do you mind giving us one experience? Okay, I'll start with you, Cornita. What I want I'm trying to do is for the audience to see that we're not making it up. These are real issues that are happening to real people. I mean, I know Dion is gorgeous and everything, you know, and she's strong and she's overcome this stuff. But can you imagine the impact? That's one thing she's told us. So I'd just like the audience to hear from us individually, one by one, just one experience you had, and we might delve into them more. But is that okay? So Cornita, let's go.
Okay. So in my situation, I personally did not go to the police. I didn't go to anyone. I didn't even go to family because of the person that I was, my perpetrator, he knew a lot of people. He's very charming. He knew what to say, when to say it. And I just thought that no one's going to believe me. So I thought I'm not going to put myself in that position where if I did say something to police, family, friend, I will get the repercussion from it. So I kept quiet for the whole time I was with him. And I think he knew that I weren't going to say anything. So that's why he kept on doing what he was doing. But when I finished, when we broke up and I came out of the relationship, and I did tell people like a year and a half later, and the reasons like, why didn't you say anything? And I says, he comes from a very good family. Unfortunately, he's just a bad egg. I didn't want to put that on his family because I knew if I told my family, he would not be alive today, put it that way. So, so I kept quiet. But I can see why, and I've heard a lot of the stories today that people will go to the police and you'll get ignored and no one would do anything. But like I said, I didn't have that experience. I was scared.
Okay, thank you. Maz?
My situation's a bit different because, like I said, with narcissistic abuse, it's quite insidious. It can be difficult to go to anybody. I did go to family members. I went to the church. I was quoted with scripture: honor your mother and fathers. Wives, submit to your husbands, and all of that kind of rhetoric. So I was presented with what we call toxic positivity, which was a barrier to my healing. So I learned to bury it for many years. So yeah, it can be difficult, especially when the thing is not physical, but even when it is physical, how do you begin to articulate that, oh, this person's making me think that I'm crazy? Oh, you know, that you'll be laughed out of the police station. And because it's difficult to articulate. And sometimes people minimize it because they say, oh, all people do that, or they'll, you know, in our community, I don't know if you had this, Cornita, there was advocates for the struggle love. Oh, if you know, imagine my own mother told me, you know, it's all right if he hits you, just take it. If he's got money, that's fine, and let him have a few women, let him cheat, it's fine.
Goodness.
You put up with it. So that's what the message that I had. So
yes. Yeah. Okay, Chantel.
So I'm going to talk about something that is not cultural, although it's often painted as this. It's situational, it's related to poverty and all of those things we know. But bearing in mind that I grew up in Cairn and I was homeless, I then obviously was groomed into a lot of criminal groups and a lot of groups who were really, really awful. And within that setting of, you know, so-called gang culture, there was this huge idea that women, and young women especially, just had to put up with what was so clearly abuse. Like the stuff that I remember were people being, you know, burnt, people having visible scars, people having the hair cut off, and people knowing about this within this kind of community, and it just being like, well, she shouldn't have done it. So there were just these real extremes of violence that were so normalized. And again, to understand this, you have to understand that Black people are overrepresented in care systems and often targeted by criminal groups and groups who want to groom young people. So for me to be in that setting was not unusual for a young Black girl in care. but it kind of numbed me to this idea of real extreme violence against women. So that when the man that I was going out with or being groomed by wasn't hitting me, it took me a very long time to realize that what he was doing was controlling what I wore, making me feel awful about myself, stealing my items, cutting me off from my friends. So he's doing everything but violence. And I would constantly rationalize it as, but he hasn't burnt me or he hasn't hit me. And so it kind of made my perception of abuse really, really skewed, because my whole idea was, you know, he was a boxer, so if he did hit me, he would have done a lot of harm. So I was like, well, he's not hit me, so it's fine. And then when I look back now, I'm like, oh my God, like what was my perception of a healthy relationship? And it's because of this whole culture that I was surrounded by, which I do have to make very clear is not a culture related to our race, but a culture related to poverty and a culture related to deprivation. But that's where I was at the time, and it just normalized these real extremes of abuse that I had no example of a healthy relationship. And for children and young people in care, that's quite often the case.
Yeah, thank you. Dion, I'll have your 1 minute, and then there's a question that I want to ask, and I'll come back to you, Chantel, with that one. But let's hear Dion's experience.
So my 1 minute is, I obviously can't go into details, but just to say that probably the worst form of victim blaming was my ex-husband, who used the authorities as a weapon against me. So I'm talking, you know, multiple reports of child abuse to the police, multiple reports of child abuse to social services, taken me to court more times than I can remember over bogus child abuse claims. He did that for, I'm going to say 13 years. I can't tell you how many times I've been dragged to court. And, you know, with really obvious, like, you know, she's a drug addict, she's a prostitute, she does this, she does that. And I'm just like, dude, like, you know, having to send proof that, you know, I've been.
So you're not a prostitute.
That I've been, having to send proof that I'm not a prostitute. You know, that I've been a sign language interpreter for 25 years, and I work in media on TV, like with ITV and BBC, and having to send video clips and screenshots of video clips to prove I'm not a prostitute, you know, and having that on repeat. Now, although, I mean, I can't say that the authorities, you know, were victim blaming. However, the police are unable to ignore any reports that involve a child. And it got to the point where the police, they would come every 2 weeks, and they were apologising at the door because, like, I'm really sorry, but we have to. He said, you've got, you know, hypodermic needles in the crib, and there's no food, and there's no electric on, and they're in my house every 2 weeks. Same with social services. Except social services were going to my boss. Got the check, you know, having to go to my boss because, again, he'd told them that I was a prostitute. They wanted to check that I actually had a job. Going to the nursery where my child was at. It went on and on and on. And so for me, like I say, although it's not direct victim blaming, I've spent 15 years of my life trying to prove that I'm worthy enough to be a mum.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a wicked thing to do to somebody.
It is
on repeat. Yeah. So
okay. Thank you. My one experience before I go to the next question. I remember finally, again, you know, thinking, surely there must be somebody to protect me in this country. There must be somebody. So I go to the pastor of a church that I attended, that my ex attended, and we were known. And I went to the pastor, and it took a lot for me to admit, because there's that stigma, isn't there, to admit that I was getting beaten up. I'm not, like you say, your typical victim. I'm not the kind of woman you would beat up. You wouldn't expect that. But it took a lot for me to admit that I was being beaten up. And I said this to the pastor. I told him some of the instances that had happened. There was all sorts of abuse. There was the sexual abuse, which just blew my mind, because I'm like this small African girl from church, you know, things that I didn't even know were possible. And the pastor said to me, get him in here, you know, like, get him in here. And I thought, here we go. He's going to get told off. He's going to get, you know, like, this is it. So I bring my ex, and the pastor gave him a diary. And he said to me, every time he hurts you, I want you to write it in the diary. And I thought, okay, of course I'll do that. So every day I'm writing, you know, the things that were said, the things that were done. Each time he hits me, each time whatever abuse I was writing it down, to the point where when I said things like, can you not treat me like this? He would say, well, what are you going to do about it? Put it in the diary. Oh, just put it in the diary and leave me alone. And that's as far as it went. That was the protection that I got from the pastor of a very renowned church on the Wirral here in the UK. Put it in the diary. Anyway, Juanita, I said I was going to come to you. A lot of people listening to this will say something along the lines of, well, why is it only Black and brown women? You know, this happens to every woman, doesn't it? Every woman in a relation, this is a female problem. 16 days of activism, you know, it's violence against women. What is the unique issue? You know, like, again, Chantel, Dion, I'm going to come to you, Maz as well. Basically, everybody has something to say on this. But I want to hear from you in terms of, what is it about Black women, and why do we need to highlight it?
I think we've covered it already before, but as our culture, where, especially if you're gonna report another Black man to the authorities, we females, we don't, me personally, I was disappointed, I was ashamed, I was embarrassed that I actually had to say that I was going through a domestic abuse relationship. I didn't even know it was a domestic abuse relationship. I was 19, he was 27. I was kicked out from my mom's house, not because I was a bad girl, just me and my mom couldn't get on. And she did ask me to come back home after 2 weeks, but me being stubborn, I didn't go back. My cousin was seeing a guy. He had a friend. He was talking and talking to me. I said, I'm not interested. I got into the relationship. He knew straight away what he was going to do. And I feel that for me, it was, okay, then he's an older guy. He know what he's doing. He'll be a protection. I got involved, had my own flat, got moved together. And it was more verbally more than physical. And how can you say to someone that I'm in a verbal bad relationship, and you're looking at him like, what are you about? What? He's not doing anything. But I know what he's saying. I know what he's doing. I know what he's threatening with me with, but I can't say anything. So it was more embarrassment, disappointment, and the fact that if I did go to the police and I says that, what can I do? What proof? Because when he did do any form of physical, he didn't make sure it was visible, so no one couldn't see, so no one couldn't see anything. And also he knew when to do it, what to do, when to say it. He was very, very clever, very intelligent man. And again, he was in the community. A lot of people knew him, so it was my word against him. But have to say, okay, then you see a white girl, a Black girl, we look different. When I tell people that you allowed a man to hit you, or you allowed a man to be like that to you, I'm like, not saying allowed, but I didn't even know what I was going through until I was watching a program on TV, and I thought, oh God, I'm in a domestic relationship. And I thought, who do I speak to? I couldn't speak to my mum at the time. I couldn't speak to my grandma. I couldn't speak to my auntie. I couldn't speak to any of my cousins. I just thought I'm alone, and I couldn't speak to any of my friends. So I just felt I'll just deal with it the best way I could. And unfortunately, I had to experience that. But
okay, let me flip the question, Juanita. Let me flip the question. And this is for everybody, because I'm going to ask everybody to contribute to this part of the question. So I said, why is it, what is it about us? You know, why do we need to highlight that Black and brown women, domestic abuse, domestic violence is a specific issue, and it, you know, for us it is different for everybody else. So let me flip the question this way. Let me also add on, who could have helped, or what could the community, religious leaders, your family, the Black community in general, who do you think could have helped, and what could they have done, do you think?
Okay, at the time I wasn't in church, so I wouldn't have gone to a church. But it would have been nice to have gone to a community area in where I lived to go to someone and say this is happening, and then have a actual like a ladies or of older generation to me who I could confide in and actually could do something about it. But unfortunately there wasn't. So it's more like having that community, having a place to go to report a situation like that. I was 19 at the time, so obviously I was young, I didn't experience relationships. So to me it would have been nice to have an elder I could go to speak to.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Maz, who could help? Who could have helped you?
No, well, what I would say, what I would say is that it's for all the reasons that we've said. It is about those harmful generational patterns that are passed down. You've all mentioned it. It's about the stigma that exists in mental health, because we are going through a trauma. We don't acknowledge it as trauma because we think that because we haven't been in a war-torn country, or we haven't had, we compare our traumas, which is not helpful, and it ties in with that strong Black woman narrative, which is also unhelpful. So at the time, who could have helped me? The whole community could have, if they would have taken it seriously. This is why, to answer your question, EJ, this is why we're having this very discussion, to raise awareness, because we face a unique set of issues. We're often not taken seriously, as Dion mentioned. We're not because you're strong, you can take it, you're resilient, just take it. What are you complaining for? Don't be soft, So that isn't helpful. So permission to heal. If we give ourselves, if the community, our community, and if we're believed, that would be a start. That would be a start.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Chantel, I'm going to come to you and then I'm going to come to Dion. Again, the question is, and I think, Chantel, you have actually highlighted this quite well in terms of the victim blaming aspect. We are blamed by our community and we're not believed by the outside. People who are not from our community don't take us seriously, like Maz has just said. And then within our community, we're told to just put up and shut up. So I think you have answered that element of it. But with your police background, with your activism and the things that you're doing, who could help? Who could have helped you? And what role does the community play, and all the leaders, church, all that? But who could have helped you, and who can help people now?
So for me, my social worker could have helped me, because at that age I was still within the leave and care team, and I had a white woman who was a social worker. And I'm going to kind of turn my answer into a question and just ask the group to think about any time you've ever cried in front of a white person.
Never.
And what happened? Because I always remember.
Sorry, I didn't realize I said that out loud. Apologies.
But whenever I cried, especially as a young person, so there was this whole concept of adultification. So even though I was young and vulnerable in care, even though the social worker has actually said to me, I'm worried you're being groomed, there was no intervention to end this relationship or support me. And at the point that I was really unwell and crying, I always remember, and whenever I've cried, including when I was a police officer being bullied in front of white people, I've always noticed that they step back almost as if they have no idea what to do, because this person who they think is strong and impenetrable and can deal with anything is showing something that kind of contradicts that narrative, and they don't know what to do. It's almost as if it's contagious and they step back. But I've found that any space that I've been in with, especially Black women, where like I've cried and stuff, they've sort of lent in and gone like, here's a hug or here's some support, and it's fine to cry in those spaces. So I think for me, I would never, as with my background as a police officer, it would take a lot for me to ever report anything to the police, because I absolutely fundamentally don't trust them. And I think when people say to, well, if you're in danger, phone the police, as if phoning the police is something that just anybody can do, and as if there isn't this whole narrative, especially if your care experience of, they'll come for me kids, they'll lock me up, they'll see me as the perpetrator, no matter how they view me, like you've said, Dion, they'll view me as the person who's at fault. There's that whole narrative that stops people from picking up the phone. But if there was a service, and I know we've got incredible services nationally like Sister Space, I do think that lived experience and that representation of other people of colour supporting people of colour in those situations, that is important, because I see it, I don't work in children's services anymore, but when I did work in children's services and I did work in policing, you just watch the way people interact. So whenever there was, you know, like a white woman crying, there's even sometimes get a hug from male officers, like, are you okay? Like they'd be held physically. But when it was a black, it was kind of like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you crying? And they'd just push the tears away and they'd be like, well, you know, we need to do this report. There'd just be this hardness. So I think support and an understanding, and I don't even want to call it unconscious bias, I want to call it palatable racism, of that palatable racism that causes you to recoil when a black woman is vulnerable because it doesn't fit your narrative that this woman can withstand anything.
Yes, thank you. I'm just responding to one of the comments on the YouTube channel. This, I mean, I know all of us on the panel here happen to be Afro-Caribbean, but please, this we are talking about people of color. So it is a general people of color situation. And I would even extend that because somebody contacted me when we advertised this and said because her accent is different. So she happens to come, she's Caucasian, but is not British. And, you know, that's a whole other story, but this is, you know, as a thing. Dion, I would like you to answer this question as somebody who's been dragged to court left, right, and center, okay? It's happened to me and I could not believe how hurtful and how intrusive the process is when you're called to court to defend yourself against something that all of us in the room know this is not true. All of us in the room know that this is a form of harassment. The system is being used against us. I just want to give a quick example before I let you talk, Dion. I have a friend of color who had to be taken to a women's shelter because her husband was extremely abusive and she had to be taken to a women's shelter to have her baby, right? 9 months pregnant, and he couldn't be anywhere near her. She had her baby. If I give too many details, she may become very obvious, but this is the scenario. She had her baby because this man was abusive. She had to be taken away, all that. She had to hide the usual stuff. Would you believe if I told you that this woman is having to pay this man child support for that child? Because social services somehow gave this baby to him. And she has to pay him child support. So as somebody, like, I'm a family court magistrate, it doesn't give me any extra anything. All it gives me is insight. And I think I became one because of the process I've been through. And I see that sometimes there's a misunderstanding of us. So it's, by the way, anybody can become a magistrate. Please apply because we could do it more people like you. Okay, and this goes for the audience as well. So Dion, talk to us about who could have helped. So each time you were taken to court, each time social services came, what could they have done?
Right. So if I ramble or start to get distracted, it's only because, you know, the things that I experienced have caused the deepest traumas, plural.
And I will stop you too.
My life. So things like the first time my son was abducted by his father. He was 2 years old. I'd had a fire at my house, couldn't cook, and so I'd spoken to his dad. I said, look, I can't cook, you know, there's 2-year-old, the kitchen's completely out of use. I'm waiting for the housing association to come and repair it. Could you look after your son? You know, we'd agreed for 2 weeks and the date that I was going to get him back. That day came and went, couldn't get hold of him. I wasn't massively concerned because, you know, I knew he'd go out to visit family. I think it was just before Christmas. By the second day, I couldn't get hold of anybody. And now I'm ringing around his family. I'm driving up to the house. We can't get hold of anybody. On Christmas Eve, I had to report my 2-year-old missing. Police came to the house. And I explained the situation. You know, I'd had a fire in the kitchen, had gone to his dad's, and he failed to return him. And what transpired was the report they actually made was there was no evidence of a fire in the house. Looks like she just didn't want her child and dropped it with the dad. That's how they translated my missing child report. And it only got worse after that. we had, I mean, just for context, that time that he took him, he was gone for 4 months. You know, I don't know if anyone's ever, you know, lost a kid in a supermarket. 4 months. It was the most harrowing, devastating event of my life. So obviously I was in contact with the police, you know, all through Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day. Boxing Day, they sent somebody out to the house at midnight. So I was with my family at the time. This police officer came to the house to let me know that social services had a meeting and they decided that the child was better off, that would be living with his father. And if I wanted to do anything about it, I'd have to go to court. And I was like, worked with social workers as an interpreter and I was like, that's the biggest load of BS I've ever heard. Of course, everything's closed. It's Christmas, so I had to wait till, you know, beginning of January, contacted social services. They'd never heard of me or my child, you know, and the corruption in the police, which allowed them to come to my house and, you know, lie to me and my family to assist my ex in stealing my child is, you know, it should be fiction. You know, it should be fiction. There's just been a complete lack of giving a damn. The assumption was my ex-husband was the most amazing communicator, and you know, he really was. That's what I fell in love with. He's also hyper intelligent, so you know, he's one of these 3-year-olds reading broadsheets. Very, very intelligent man, and worked hard on his reputation. And of course, with his, you know, with his patter and his swagger, destroyed my reputation to elevate his at every twist and turn. I said, I don't know how many times somebody can be taken to court and accused of being a prostitute. I'll tell you what it is. It's 12. And for the courts to continue entertaining it, and I've been begging and pleading with the, you know, with the judge to say, you can see how many times this has come to court, and every time, you know, it's dismissed because there's no evidence of that whatsoever. You know, I've got a job, is what I pay. And for the, you know, white older man judge to be, you know, conversing with my ex, just honestly, there's so many people who could have helped and didn't. I will never get help from a court run by old white men. I will never get help from police that are run by white men. I will never get help from social services who are run by white women, because, you know, that after the third and final time that my son was taken, 2 years, he'd been gone 2 years, and I got a brown envelope through the letterbox telling me that I was being taken to court, child abuse against the child I hadn't seen for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Don't ask. And I'm just like, when the judge is entertaining this, it cost me, honestly, it cost me nearly £4,000. I had to get a barrister to rebut the same stupid claims again. And I said, I haven't seen this child for 2 years. So it's not bad enough you've stolen my child. You still need to persecute me. And I begged and pleaded with that judge. I sent like separate communications direct to the judge, pleading and just saying, your system is being weaponized against me. And if you can't see that and do something against it, I've got no hope, you know? And, you know, I can't be the only one is all I can say to that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not the only one, Dion. And yes, for all of us on the panel, I'm very conscious of time now. And I am going to wrap this up if that's okay. But I want to end this by saying, I'm going to give you all 1 more minute again, but I want to end it by saying, you are not the only one. And thank you, all of you on the panel, for validating the experiences of people who may be listening to us so that they know that they're not the only ones as well. And they're not going crazy. Maz has talked to us about gaslighting. You're not going crazy. It is happening. So I think there's a consensus. No, minus Maz, because Maz is mental health, and she's going to tell us in a minute what we can do in situations where we feel like we are being abused. Remember, it's not just by intimate partners, be family, whoever. whoever. Okay, so I'll come to you in a minute, Maz, and then everybody. I'm going to give you 1 minute. But what I want to ask, or what I would like you to do, please, because it looks like there is an agreement that we can't trust the system. You know, I've had experiences of calling the police not so long ago, actually. In the last 9 to 12 months, I've called the police because somebody's banging on my door, filming my house, shouting, walking left, right, and center for 45 minutes. The police didn't turn up until maybe 5, 6 hours later. So I'm not going to be calling them again. Okay. I know, you know, like Dion and myself, some of us have been taken through perhaps the justice system and we feel like we can't trust them. Cornita won't even go to the police during her situation because, again, she doesn't trust them. Chantel has talked to us about her experiences calling the police and, you know, it going nowhere. Some of us, from a religious perspective, again, you know, we're not going to go to pastors anymore because they perpetuate, it seems. I'm not saying everybody is the same, but this is our experience, and you're not the only one. I'm not the only one. You know, a lot of us have these experiences. I don't want to talk about just church because it's a lot of religious groups are conservative when it comes to issues like this, about not telling people and being closed about these kind of issues. So what can we do? If there's a woman who is listening now, who does not trust the police, does not trust any of her community leaders, what can we do? So Maz first, then Cornita, then I'm going to come back to you, Dion, and then Chantel.
Yes. Well, as we've all touched on this, but yeah, essentially what we can do as a community is not victim blame or shame people. We need to be able to successfully advocate for people who don't have a voice. So even I work within adult mental health, but we get a lot of safeguarding that's domestic violence related. And although it's often because it's a criminal matter, and if the police aren't doing anything, then we're powerless. But there needs to be training, I would say, even within us, because we're not specialists. And just by the way, when we've all been through this, of course, trauma impacts each of us in different ways. And I want to highlight that it's particularly dangerous because there is a prevalence, there's a prevalence in mental health disorders that are anxiety related. Yes, PTSD and depression are the most common ones. You need those diagnoses, by the way, to access services, because if you don't have a diagnosis, you're not deemed as vulnerable, therefore you won't. You know,
That's an interesting point, actually. Wow.
Yeah, you can't access services. So when we're doing safeguardings, if the person's not deemed vulnerable, we're just like, well, go and tell the police. But of course, as we've heard, and the police and other public bodies are not responding in an appropriate manner. So just bear in mind that we are more susceptible, anyone that's experienced a trauma. So yeah, we need to create safe spaces like we have. I know, Cornita, you've got your organization. We've all been a part of that. More safe spaces are needed, because we know that people ultimately can heal once they feel heard, once they feel seen. You know, and yeah, we need specialist training for professionals. We need partnership working, because people are complex. They don't just fit into one box, you know. So that is the thing. And please, just on a general, people, for those of us who may or may not be professionals, don't, you know, when I'll come back to toxic positivity again. So that looks like, EJ, when someone says to you, oh, EJ, what are you complaining about? You know, at least you know, he hasn't beaten you. He pays the bills, doesn't he? What are you know, that kind of thing. It's the kind of thing, especially in our culture, that they think they're being positive, but it's actually detrimental. It's that kind of thing that says, when, you know, someone does, what are you crying for? The person's in a better place. Shut up, stop crying. It dismisses and minimizes the person's experience. Let's not do that. Let's educate ourselves. And all of you who are here tonight, thank you for coming, because it's a start. We're having this conversation. We need to continue, and we need to support. So whether you're a neighbor, whether it's your friend, your family member, please, when someone's telling you something, you might not feel it, but they feel it. It's valid. Please, let's start by at least listening. And there are plenty of organizations, which I know, Dion, you're going to explain afterwards, where people can access that support. Let's utilize it, by the way, before the government takes it away. So because I say that because a lot of people say, oh, we don't have representation, there's no support. There is support. There's more than there was 20, 30 years ago. Let's utilize it. Take everything that's offered, and it's confidential. It's if it doesn't work for you, because EJ, you mentioned something earlier. What good does therapy do? What good is having a coach? Well, try it and then let us know. You won't know till you try. So
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cornita.
Kind of basically just gonna follow what Matt says. Educate ourselves with the policies that we do have. There's policies that we don't know about, and what we actually can be accessible to. And again, if you've got sometimes it's not about speaking to someone and have to say something back. Just listen. Just listen to them, take on what they say, and just let them vent, basically. You don't have to say something back to them. Sometimes they don't want to hear anything. They just want to make you listen, hear what they're going through, and understand. As we know, there's not just physical abuse, there's financial abuse, there's verbal abuse. There's people who just literally just speak to you a certain way that it makes you feel disgusting. It makes you feel horrible. It makes you feel not nice. It makes you feel you're not wanted, rejection, all that kind of stuff. And it is a abuse. But because we look at it as if you're getting physical abuse, then that's abuse. If you're getting spoke to, pull up your pants and get on with it. But that's not the case. So it's about also creating a safe space within your community and have someone that you can actually go to speak to about something. Don't feel that you're alone, because as we can see today, there's loads of people on the panel who's listening, and there's also people here who's got loads of experiences within Birmingham, Liverpool, Wales, wherever, even in the States. It's worldwide. So we just need to come together and speak up and be the voice of reasoning.
Thank you. Did I say Chantel, or actually, Dion, I'm going to let you come last, so that I'm going to hand over to you. Okay. Chantel?
Yeah. So I think there's certain loads of questions, and obviously with safeguarding in mind, there's a lot of sort of routine questions that people ask when someone makes a disclosure of abuse. And then there's sort of the loads of questions that happen around it too. So for me, I really have an issue with this. Whenever somebody says something about abuse or a hate crime, the first question that usually comes out of someone's mouth is, did you go to the police? And if the answer is no, there is this silent judgment, almost as if you haven't reported it to the police, it's not valid. And I've lost count of the amount of times that people have been told, well, if you don't report it, then there's nothing that can be done. And yet they don't present this argument, which was something that was cited in the Casey report into the Met Police. This key quote that came from that, which said, the Black community are over-policed and underprotected. And we all know this. We know that on one hand, parts of our community are over-policed. We're always viewed as the perpetrator in all situations. And I think it's really interesting, Dion, that you drew in this. If you are in an interracial relationship where you've got the white person is the man, then the Black woman is always going to be viewed, because there's just this idea that the Black woman can never be a victim. So with that in mind, people know what the kinds of reception they're going to get from the police. In my life, and this includes my time as a police officer, when I have always phoned the police as a victim, I've never been treated as a victim. And each and every time I've interacted with the police, I've gone, I don't want to do that again. And so the barometer of when I will phone the police just gets higher and higher and higher, because I'm like, it would have to be life or death, it would have to be really, really serious. And so it's when you have, the more interactions you have with the police and the less you're taken seriously, or the more you dismiss, the less likely you are to interact with them again. But another sort of offhand comment that people often get as well, which is something, like my nan's generation would say this, because what we also have to accept is Black communities were quite often backed into corners in terms of you were in relationships for life, you couldn't really get out of them, and the whole community was up against it, so you just sort of had to put up. And a lot of that violence that was enacted against women was like, well, it's frustration about what men are facing out there and the racism that they're facing. And there was kind of this idea, you just have to, you have to support him through that. And that was like the elder generation's kind of concept of these marriages that were really toxic, and that toxicity has been passed down. So like when you make disclosures, and I always remember telling me nan in particular about like, this relationship is awful, like this guy it feels like he's really, really stalking me and I'm really, really worried. And she was like, but is he hitting you, girl? Is he hitting you? And I was like, no. And then it was basically, well, what are you moaning about? And that wasn't her being, an awful person. That's because for her, it was just these two black and whites. It was either he's beating you or he's not. And if he's not, what's the issue?
The problem?
But we still find those statements when people, and it can come across in many different guises, but when someone sort of leans in and goes, but has he hit you? And it's so loaded and it's so disempowering. So I think those are two things that we really need to get into discourse. And I feel like services, especially, I've worked with some fantastic domestic abuse services led by women who are survivors, are the best space, because quite often the judgment-free spaces, and you can engage with those spaces, and they know what it's like to be asked, have you gone to the police? Did he hit you? So they're the least likely people to ask that, and they're also the least likely people to go, so when are you going to leave? And push people to timeline something that they might not even have been able to conceptualize in their head. So I do think the money should be going into services and not always increasing the police capacity, because the police are so triggering for so many people that we just need people with lived experience.
Thank you so much. In summary, and then I'm going to hand us all back to Dion. In summary, these are the points that I've got from today. Actually, I'm going to not say that. I'm going to say it this way. Can we all, as a panel and everybody in the audience, can we all today promise, first, that we will be a safe place? Yeah, because our ancestors, our elders, our moms, our grandmoms, they worked with the information that they had. And we're seeing now that it wasn't always the best decision. We have more information now. So first, can we all promise? I promise to be a safe place for any woman who comes to me, especially a woman of color who comes to me. I am a safe place. Secondly, can all of us also have in mind safe places? Where can people go? So if somebody comes to me, where can I point her to? So everybody identify the safe places and the safe people around you. Lastly, you are not on your own. You are not going crazy. This is happening and your feelings are valid. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, panel. Thank you, audience. I'm going to pass you back now to Queen Dion, and she's going to conclude this, and then we'll go to the next segment. But thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been an amazing discussion, really. So I think my contributions really around what are some of the things that that we can do and that our communities can do. From a Caribbean culture and background, I think we suffer from a lack of compassion towards ourselves. And that, for better or worse, it stems from slavery. I don't doubt that for a second. I remember having a conversation with family members, and, physical violence towards each was normal. It was expected even. And I heard a family member use a term, and it shook me. But I was like, oh my gosh. So it's like each family has like either a patriarch or a matriarch who rules with an iron fist. And it was, oh, they've become our new overseer. Now we're not slaves anymore. And I was like, damn, that, it felt like a low blow, but it was because it felt true, being, having generations ruled by, torture and pain and wickedness. And if you're born into that and raised into it, don't take long before that becomes kind of normal, So yeah, I think compassion is something that we can all work on. I would certainly say for churches and other religious groups, I think it's really important to prioritize people and not relationships. I was really fortunate over the weekend to support the Crossing Point Domestic Abuse Service with their training. So they do specific training for churches around domestic abuse and spiritual abuse. Fantastic. So details will be included in all of the support information after the event. And I had a really a bit of a intense conversation really with one of the pastors, who got quite upset when I disagreed with pastors getting involved in relationships effectively. So it was kind of like, you know, someone's come to you and said that they're experiencing domestic abuse, and your first response is, right, let's get the other person, let's get you both in and sort it out. And I was like, no. And I think they thought that I was somehow saying that they weren't skilled enough to be able to bring this couple back together. And I was like, it's not even that. I said, because you've already got an agenda. You've already decided for this person what you want to happen, which is to get them back together. You've not listened to the person with no judgment. You haven't asked them what they want in the situation. And that's the situation we constantly find ourselves in, is that we can't express ourselves without, somebody with a completely different agenda than ours trying to do something else, and then we get lost. Our needs are then overlooked again. So I would say, could we stop going in? It's not helpful trying to get people back together. What we need in your help is for you to listen, ask us what you want, what do we want. Aside from the risks that could put somebody in, we all know that if you report abuse and your abuser kind of gets wind of it, it's 10 times worse when you get back home. And then they cut off all of your access points for support, and it's really, really unhelpful. So those things are definitely something that we can do. When it comes to institutions, police, healthcare, I think I've given up, and it sounds really horrible. I'm 47 years old. I've lived in the UK my entire life, and I moved house 3 months ago because I spent 6 years living somewhere where I was being racially abused, and the police, weren't helpful. They just weren't helpful. I don't know how that will ever change, and it's making me upset to realize that I live in such a hostile environment, and we do, which is why it's even more important for communities, families, religious groups to be that safe space, because we live in an antagonistic environment everywhere we go, not believed, victim blamed, treated worse than everybody, on repeat. And so to not have that safe space, and actually the people like us should be the ones to give us that safe space. And I think often they don't realize how bad it is outside the doors of their places. So yeah, I think just working on that compassion, not going in with an agenda, and being safe spaces for Black and brown women. Cool. Right. Thank you so much, guys. This has been super. I'm so pleased with just the caliber of conversation that we've given ourselves the opportunity to do this, but also we've passed this opportunity along. I really hope that it will lead to open doors, new opportunities, and just more ways to educate and support people to support women like us. So just thank you so much. We're going to take a very short break. We know it's been a bit of a intense conversation, so Cornita is going to lead us in a meditation for 4 or 5 minutes. And then we'll take another 5 minutes after that as a break, just so that we can decompress from the topics that we've talked about, which have been great and very invigorating, but it can also cause quite a lot of stress, maybe some anxiety. So we want to give opportunity to, you know, rest and relax and decompress from that. We'll be back in 10 minutes, which will take us to 9 o'clock. We are running slightly late due to our previous technical issues, but hopefully everyone's happy to stay on. When we come back, we will briefly go through and respond to questions and comments on YouTube, and then it will be just our final thoughts, and then that will be it. So I will leave you in Cornita's capable hands. If everybody else wants to turn their cameras and mics off, that'll be great. So let me get you some music up there, Cornita.
Thank you.
If I can manage to do it this time without crashing my entire laptop, that would be.
Does mine need to be on, or do I need to turn mine off as well?
No, you leave yours on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because I think it helps to be able to see, doesn't it?
Okay.
Right. Okay. Right, I think we've got some music there now.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. So if you can find a comfortable space wherever you are, and just sit in a quiet place. And then I would like you to close your eyes. Gently just close your eyes and just take a few deep breaths, inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. And I want you to do that 3 times, just slowly in your own pace. Breathe deeply. Focus on breathing. Feel the rise of your chest with each breath inhaling, bringing in calm, and each exhale, releasing tension. Again, just do that very slowly and in your own pace. I want you to visualize peace. So picture yourself in a place where you feel completely safe and at peace. It could be a beach, a forest, or a cozy room. And imagine the smells, the sounds, and just be you. Just take that moment and embrace that time in those spaces. Now, affirmations. And I want you to say this to yourself silently. Repeat again 3 times. I am safe. I am strong. I am healing. I am beautiful in and out. I am safe. I am strong. I am healing. I am beautiful in and out. I am safe. I am strong. I am healing. I am beautiful in and out. Release your thoughts. Anything that you're thinking of that is not of what you want to think about, just go back to your safe space. And at this time, any gratitude that you want to give to someone or you think that you are grateful for in this moment, this is the time to do it. So just take time to think about the things that you want to be, you are grateful for. Now, slowly, I want you to come back, bring yourself in your awareness and surround yourself with the thoughts that you've had. And what I want you to do is wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, stretch if you need to. And when you feel ready, you may open your eyes. A sense of balance and tranquility. I hope you enjoyed the meditation.
for those who are still online with us, I'm just going to invite everybody from the panel back on, those who are still here. Right, they'll be on shortly. Hi, Mars. And EJ. And I think Cornita will be back with us shortly. So yeah, I think just to wrap up, I just want to thank everybody who has been part of the event today, who's watched us on the live stream, those who have sent us comments and questions. Obviously our amazing panel. You women have outdone yourself today. Yeah, it's honestly, I'm absolutely blown away by just our ability to communicate through what has been, you know, obvious pain and trauma, but, you know, with that capacity to be able to translate that into something positive and educational. You know, not everybody can do that. So I am very, very grateful to all of you for, you know, putting yourself out there and, you know, being honest, open, transparent, and yeah, making yourselves available for others. So there will be some additional information with a range of services and services for domestic abuse, mental health, self-care, which will be shared with everybody who registered for the event. So you will get an email with that information on there. As you may have seen on the slideshow as well, nearly all of our panelists have written books. Who knew? So a lot of us have written books about our experiences, all the things that we've learned, and you know, we again that, you know, capacity to communicate what we have learned through our experiences, I think is really impressive, to be honest with you. So that information will be shared with you as well. I'll be sending social media links so that you can connect with all of the panel members. Please, if you are part of you know, any kind of organisation, whether it's statutory, private, charity, council, whatever, and you are looking for either, you know, support to support others, or you have questions, or you know, you're looking for training, etc., please do get in touch with any of the panel members here. We'll be able to support and assist you with that. So really what we're looking for here is to continue engaging people, is to, you know, continue highlighting those issues and helping people to become part of the solution to some of the issues that Black and brown women face when going through domestic abuse issues. So I think that's, oh, just to say as well, our event partner, Living Beyond Surviving, we've had some donations in already, so thank you to all those of you who have already donated. Chuffed to bits. Those funds will go directly to their online support group for Black women. It's called Queens Supporting Queens. If you would still like to give and support that, you can head straight over to their website, which is livingbeyondsurviving.org, and you can make your donation direct to them, or you can find them on social media. Does anyone have any like closing thoughts before we let these good people get off for the night? Maz?
Yeah, I mean, I always do. I just think, please don't suffer in silence. If your tradition, your religion, and your culture is oppressing you, then you might need to put some distance in it. And I know that's hard. It's hard, isn't it, to rebuild? But you've advertised it, but there's plenty of aftercare, and feel free to connect with me. I do have some complimentary virtual sessions on a first come, first served basis. or you know, you can read the book Arise Kintsugi Queens. But yeah, we're all here to support you. So thank you very much for your time and attention tonight.
Brilliant. Kanita?
Just thank you to Dion for putting this amazing event on. This is definitely needed in the community, and it's nice that Black women can come together, spread our love, our experiences, and we can help others. We all are authors on here, so go and read the books that can educate you and also help you to heal as well.
Brilliant. EJ?
Or I'll last comment to answer the question on YouTube that just said,
All right, go on.
Secret Whisper says, what was your turning point? And that is the perfect question for me to end my part in this.
Yeah.
And my turning point was when I realized that I am worth it, like you are. I did not come to this world less than anybody else. Nobody has the right to abuse me. And I am worth joy and happiness. And I would be damned if I let anybody continue to rob me of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope we can all get to that point that we are so worth it. Enough is enough. I have a slogan these days. I don't say it very often, but I think it a lot. And it is, gone are those days.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very, very true. Very rich. Thank you. So actually, I'm gonna respond to Secret Whispers. So I have had, you know, several kind of long-term intimate relationships, and it wasn't until about 4 or 5 years ago when I was doing some domestic abuse training that I realized I've never had a relationship that wasn't abusive. And honestly, it devastated me. I felt sick. I had to come off the training, and my head was spinning. And I've had several turning points, is what I will say. And you know, I know there's many women like me, and I know Chantel spoke about growing up in care. I didn't grow up in care. I was one of those that slipped through the net because I was living, you know, isolated, effectively with, you know, a little cult who kept us hidden from the world. And I just grew up with very, very twisted concepts of what I thought love was, you know. To me, love was making sure the other person was happy so they didn't hurt me. And I thought that for the longest time. I was never allowed to have an opinion or say no without it resulting in physical, you know, abuse. And so, you know, when you meet somebody who, you know, when you meet somebody, you of course carry those things that you've learned with you into your next relationship. That was one thing actually that I didn't mention earlier that I just wanted to quickly touch on, was that in a lot of religious groups, you know, churches and other religions, the restrictions we place on women, clothing, hair, who you can talk to, who you can't talk to, where you can go, when you can't go, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. That culture is a breeding ground for abuse. So I grew up in that, you know, getting beaten because you know, your skirt was, you know, not longer than your knees, or I showed an elbow or some other random thing. So of course, when my husband was like, you're not wearing that, you've got to wear that, I didn't question it. And I sit here wondering how many, you know, parents are out there who have adapted to this over controlling of their girls who will become women, and actually what you're instilling in them is compliance to, you know, it's like a gateway to abuse, basically. Not allowing them to have opinions, not allowing them to it's really important that we learn to form not just opinions, but be able to make decisions. You know, and it's a really critical time, as you know, from like a tween to your kind of older teenage years, that it's critical thinking. we need to be able to learn to make decisions for ourselves. Some of those decisions won't be great, some of them will be great, you know, and we need that grace from people to support us through that. Instead, what we have is, you know, criticism, judgment, and controlling, you know, because to make sure we don't do any of those things. And it's really, really harmful. So yeah, just again, the last thought. So yes, thank you to everybody. If anyone's got any questions at all, wants to connect with us, you can email author@dionnsimpson.co.uk. I'll happily forward on communications for all of the other panels. Thank you so much for taking part in tonight. I hope this isn't the last one, actually, because I'm really enjoyed tonight, even though bits of it were hard, but I've really enjoyed tonight. So thank you for helping us raise awareness of domestic abuse and Black and brown women. And good night. Mwah.
Night, everyone.